For millennia, humanity has been observing the skies in search of signs that reveal their destiny. Shooting stars, eclipses, and constellations have been interpreted as divine messages or sacred warnings. But there is one star in particular, which does not move with natural patterns, nor does it belong to traditional astronomical maps. It is the flaming star, a veiled symbol present in occult traditions, in forgotten engravings, and in visionary accounts that span centuries. It is not a physical star, but a spiritual manifestation, a burning spark that appears as an intimate revelation to those ready to awaken. And yet, this star has been ignored by entire generations because it does not shine in the skies. It shines in the human heart. This star represents something that goes beyond symbols and doctrines. It is the archetype of divine consciousness in the process of remembering. Many have seen it in dreams, others in mystical visions, and some have felt it as an inexplicable warmth in the center of their chest, followed by a sudden clarity about life and their real mission. The flaming star does not appear to everyone, but only to those who have reached a certain degree of spiritual maturity, enough to question, to break veils, and to see reality with the eyes of the soul. It is called flaming because it burns the veil of illusion, it consumes ignorance and illuminates the path of self-awareness, bringing to light a truth that can no longer be denied. Christ is not a man, but a presence that lives in each one. The oldest records about this star appear in a coded form. In the Chaldean tradition, it was the fire of the gods. In the Hindu Vedas, the internal Agni. In the Gnostic Gospels, the light of the inner Christ. Each culture developed a unique way of referring to this same subtle phenomenon. This is not empty mysticism, but a code of consciousness translated into symbolic language, so that it could endure eras of darkness and remain accessible to those who knew how to decipher it. And today, when so many souls feel disoriented and fragmented, the glow of this star begins to manifest more intensely as a collective call to awaken what was dormant. But what is the risk of ignoring this call? When the soul begins to remember what it is, it sends signals, it cries out for direction. If this restlessness is repressed, the emptiness deepens and a pain emerges that no distraction or material achievement can silence. The flaming star arises precisely at this threshold, when the soul demands truth. The absence of a response to this call creates an internal rupture, a dangerous distancing between who we are and what we live. This dissonance generates anguish, diseases, and a life disconnected from its own original spark. The call of the star is not merely symbolic, it is biological, emotional, vibrational. In many ancient cultures, the wise spoke of a time when the heavens and the earth would be out of sync, and humans would need to find within themselves the bridge between the two worlds. That time is now. The flaming star represents precisely this bridge. It arises as an inner light, almost imperceptible, that begins to pulse stronger and stronger as we turn inward. This subtle fire does not burn the flesh, but purifies the consciousness. It is not an external phenomenon, but a vibrational process that awakens memories, gifts, and above all, purpose. And for those who feel this call, a challenge also arises: to break free from the rigid structures of the conditioned mind. The star demands courage. It does not tolerate illusions. Its fire dissolves lies, destroys masks, and forces the individual to confront their shadows. That's why so many give up halfway. It's easier to continue sleeping. But for those who carry on, the reward is indescribable, a state of clarity so profound that life itself takes on a new meaning. It's not about an external revelation, but an absolute alignment between mind, heart, and spirit. There is a silent question that haunts every soul in search of meaning. Is there more to life than what I'm experiencing? This question is the beginning of the journey. It's the whisper of the star. The mind often can't comprehend it, but the heart knows. The flame that burns silently is also the assurance that we are more than just a body, name, or social role. We are sparks of the divine intelligence itself. The symbol of the flaming star is the map to this reunion with what we were before we became matter. It's a reminder that something sacred pulses within each of us, waiting to be activated. Ancient Egyptian texts speak of a star descending from the heart of the sun to touch the initiates. It's not just an astronomical metaphor, but a direct reference to the connection between the human heart and solar, or Christ consciousness. Christ in this sense is not an external savior, but a frequency, a spiritual intelligence that begins to manifest when we become pure enough vessels to receive it. The star is the symbolic form of this activation. It emerges when a person purifies themselves enough to allow the light to pass through without distortion. The presence of the star has also been mentioned in near-death experience accounts, where many claim to have seen a light so intense and welcoming that words fail to describe. This light is not located in any specific place in the cosmos, it is within, and when it is seen, even if for a few seconds, the entire belief structure of the person transforms. What was once theoretical becomes real. The star reveals itself, and in doing so, dismantles everything that does not belong to the truth. Medieval mystics like Hildegard von Bingen reported visions of a flaming point at the heart's center, singing an eternal song. The singing fire is the living Christ presence. It is not necessary to be tied to a specific religion to access it, because it does not belong to any doctrine. It is universal, silent, and at the same time, pulsating. The flaming star is the living symbol of this eternal mystery. Those who feel it know, nothing will be as before. And why now? Because the world has reached a point of saturation. The analytical mind can no longer answer the soul's anxieties. External structures are crumbling because they were built on foundations disconnected from the spirit. The flaming star returns, not as a novelty, but as a reminder. It reignites what has always been within, but was covered by layers of fear, control, and forgetfulness. It is not a prophecy of the future, but the revelation of what has always been. At its core, the flaming star is an invitation and a responsibility. An invitation to ignite your own light, to become a conscious channel of the divine energy that wishes to manifest itself through each awakened being. But it is also a responsibility to sustain this light amidst the darkness of the world, to act as a beacon when everything around seems to crumble. The path of the star is not easy, but it is liberating. And the first step is to accept it as real. For it is already there, pulsating, waiting for you to look within and see what has always been a flame. Long before the empires known by conventional history, even before civilizations recorded by papyri or clay tablets, there was a continent surrounded by legends where spiritual and scientific knowledge walked side by side: Atlantis. This was not just a city with advanced technology, but a living organism deeply connected to the cosmos. At its heart pulsed the most sacred secret, the eternal flame, also known as the spark of the flaming star. It was not a physical flame, but a living consciousness, which vibrated at such a high frequency that it could only be perceived by those who had purified their energy field to the point of becoming mirrors of light. It was this flame that fueled the core of Atlantean wisdom, a fire that did not consume but revealed. The guardians of the flame were not priests in the religious sense, but highly trained beings in spiritual science. They were men and women whose genetics, consciousness, and purpose were intertwined with the mission to preserve the legacy of the eternal flame. These guardians did not seek power, status, or dominance. They understood that the flame was not property, but a cosmic principle, a universal intelligence that, if misused, could cause the ruin not only of a civilization, but of entire worlds. Therefore, they operated in silence, protecting the star codes, the knowledge about sacred geometry, vibrational resonance, and mechanics of living light. Their records were made in living crystals, which resonated with the field of whoever touched them. These crystals not only stored information, but activated dormant memories in the soul of those who were ready. Atlantis fell, not by divine will, but by human choice. When part of the population began to use the power of the flame for manipulation, ego, and control, a distortion was created in the planet's energy grid. The Earth, sensitive to the imbalance, responded with abrupt movements like shaking a body to eliminate a fever. The continent sank, but the Guardians knew this would happen. Many left before the catastrophe, guided by precise visions. They dispersed to various parts of the globe, taking with them fragments of knowledge and sealing the codes of the flaming star in the most secret corners of the earth and of the human psyche. The majority headed for Kemet, the ancient Egypt, where the flame could be replanted under new names and rituals. These guardians were endowed with abilities today referred to as paranormal: telepathic communication, quantum field reading, vibrational manipulation of matter. Not because they were special, but because they lived in alignment with the natural flow of creation. The eternal fire they guarded was not visible to the physical eyes, but everyone who approached it felt an unmistakable warmth, not on the skin, but in the soul. A warmth that dissolved lies, burned illusions, and brought forth an ancestral memory that we are all part of a universal solar consciousness. Therefore, the symbol of the flaming star was not just a geometric design. It represented the core of the human being in its purest, Christ-like form, before the fall, before the pain. The Atlantean libraries were not made of books, but of frequencies. They were rooms where crystals of great purity vibrated in harmony, emitting sounds and lights that conveyed not just information, but transformation. Upon entering, the initiate did not read. They were activated. The eternal flame revealed itself not by imposition, but by resonance. Those who were ready remembered. Those who were not saw only a beautiful light. The guardians knew this. They had the mission to protect these vibrational portals and teach only those who proved, by the vibration of the heart, that they were ready to carry the fire without corrupting it. These guardian lineages have been called by various names throughout history: children of the sun, the pure ones, the nameless, the silent ones. They did not seek recognition, but the maintenance of balance. Their lineages hid among cultures that would later be considered primitive, but which held, in their rituals, fragments of the flame. Peoples such as the Mayans, Toltecs, Celts, and Druids received this legacy, adapting it to the language of the time. And even in the face of persecution, the destruction of their temples, and the distortion of their symbols, they continued. Because the flame, once lit within, never goes out. It simply awaits the right moment to expand again. The flaming star was also understood as a spiritual technology, a bridge between worlds. With it, it was possible to access Akashic records, heal deep imbalances, and even restructure genetic patterns. Not as an external miracle, but as a realignment with the original code of creation. That's why it was feared by those who wanted to maintain control over the people. Dominating minds is impossible when hearts are ignited. Therefore, the flame was pursued, hidden, ridiculed, but never extinguished. Those who knew of its power swore to protect its frequency, even if it meant the sacrifice of their own life. The fall of Atlantis was not just a geological event. It was a turning point in the history of human consciousness. The disconnection from the flame marked the beginning of collective forgetfulness. Humans began to identify only with the body, with the ego, with survival. The symbol of the flaming star, previously present in rituals, architecture, and language, was banned or distorted. It became hidden. The remaining guardians knew that a new cycle would come, a time when humanity, tired of its own pain, would seek the inner light again. They seeded this time with codes scattered across monuments, myths, and star maps. And that time is now. For millennia, the codes of the flaming star have remained dormant, both in sacred places and within human DNA itself. Genetics carry not only biological information, but also spiritual. Within certain lineages, latent traits of Atlantean consciousness remain, waiting for the correct stimulus: a frequency, a memory, a sound, a word. When activated, these traits awaken not powers, but responsibilities. Because the consciousness that vibrates in the flaming star demands coherence, truth, and purity of intention. It is not a path for those who seek power. It is a trail for those who wish to serve the light. The initiations of the guardians did not take place in physical temples, but in expanded states of consciousness. They were conducted by non-physical masters, beings of light who still today wait in subtle planes for those who truly desire to reignite the flame. These initiations did not end with the fall of Atlantis. They continue, invisible to the eyes, but powerful for those who silence the mind and heed the call. The flaming star continues to ignite hearts, and those who feel it awaken memories that do not belong to any specific life, but to the eternal spirit itself. The oath of the Guardians has been passed down through generations, to keep the flame alive until humanity is ready to rediscover it. And this readiness is not collective, it is individual. Each human being who awakens to the light within helps to reactivate the energy grid of the blazing star over the earth. This is not about religion, but a vibration, an internal choice. When someone ignites this light within themselves, even if they do not fully understand the process, they become an active part of the divine plan for reconnection. The flame is alive, conscious, and responsive. Today, more than ever, this legacy resurfaces, not as nostalgia for a lost past, but as guidance for a possible future. The memory of Atlantis is not a painful recollection, but a mirror of what we are capable of when we live in harmony with the spirit. The flaming star is the call to restore this potential, and the Guardians, now scattered around the world, slowly awakening, know the time has come to reignite the flame. Not a destructive fire, but the fire that illuminates, heals, and reveals. The fire of Christ consciousness that, once reignited, transforms everything around it. When the Guardians of the eternal flame left Atlantis, they took with them not only fragments of knowledge, but light codes that needed to be planted in fertile lands to be reborn at the right time. The most important of these lands was Kemet, ancient Egypt, whose original name means black land, a reference not only to the fertility of the soil, but to the alchemical potential of the still dormant human consciousness, ready to be shaped by the light of the spirit. Egypt was not a spontaneous creation, but a direct continuation of Atlantean wisdom. The pyramids, the temples, the solar rituals, and even the gods were carefully crafted symbolic expressions designed to preserve the mysteries of the flaming star. Nothing there was superstition. Each symbol was a vector of multidimensional information. The figure of Ra, the sun god, is more than a representation of the star that shines in the skies. Ra symbolizes the internal fire that illuminates consciousness, the solar principle that lives within every being and needs to be awakened for the soul to assume its role as a divine expression. Ra's solar bark sailing through Duat, the underworld, is a metaphor for the soul's journey through the darkness of unconsciousness to rebirth in the light. Isis, Osiris, and Horus were not just mythological characters, but spiritual archetypes. Isis represents intuition, Osiris the death of the ego, and Horus the birth of divine vision, the star that re-emerges after the fall. The entire Egyptian pantheon, when interpreted with initiatory eyes, reveals the same principles of the flaming star in symbolic language. In the mystery schools of Luxor, Heliopolis, and Saqqara, initiates underwent lengthy purification processes before receiving the highest teachings. These centers of wisdom were not accessible to the common people. There, knowledge of the flame was conveyed in a coded manner, using metaphors, rituals, and geometries that resonated with the disciples' energy field. The pyramid was not just a tomb, but a transmutation chamber. At the center of the Great Pyramid, in its king's chamber, a geometric alignment occurs that favors the activation of the pineal gland and the heart center. There, the flaming star was not seen with the physical eyes, but felt at the core of the being, like a gentle and constant warmth that overflowed from within. These initiations required silence, surrender, and symbolic death. The initiate was placed in symbolic sarcophagi to experience the disconnection of the senses and direct contact with the inner flame. Upon emerging, they were no longer the same. What returned to the world was a transfigured being, with a new perspective, a new frequency, a silent mission, to maintain the light of the star in a world immersed in the shadows of ignorance. The pyramid texts, the rituals of the Book of the Dead, and the hymns to Aton speak of a flame that is born in the heart and consumes darkness with love. This flame was Christ himself in his energetic form, long before any name or religion was established. Few today understand the true role of Akhenaton, the heretical pharaoh. His mission was to rekindle the worship of the inner sun, the singular energy that lives in all. By breaking away from polytheism and establishing the worship of Aton, the solar disk, Akhenaton was trying to reveal the true nature of the flaming star. The symbol of Aton, with its rays ending in hands touching beings, clearly represents the Christ consciousness being radiated from the source to all beings. But his attempt was met with violence. The priests of the old cult, fearing the loss of control, erased his name, destroyed his temples, and rewrote history. The legacy of the flame was once again hidden beneath layers of fear and manipulation. Despite this, the teachings were not lost. Hermes Trismegistus, an enigmatic figure that many associate with the reincarnated Atlantean Thoth, was responsible for encoding this knowledge into Hermetic texts that would later influence the entire occult tradition of the West. His maxims, such as above, so below, the all is mind, and the sun is the father of matter, are direct translations of the principles of the Christic flame, the flaming star that lives in all planes. Hermes taught that true initiation was internal and that only those who had the courage to confront their own shadow could receive the light without getting burned. He was a messenger of fire, a guardian of the living geometry of the soul. The transition from Egypt to the Greco-Roman world represented a new attempt to preserve this knowledge, but it also marked the beginning of a long era of distortions. The mysteries of Eleusis, the Orphic cults, the Pythagorean schools, and the Platonic traditions drew from this Egyptian source, but over time they were persecuted and fragmented. Still, the symbol of the flaming star continued to emerge discreetly in mosaics, sculptures, alphabets, and even in the architectural proportions of ancient temples. The flame hid in the details, waiting for initiated eyes to recognize it. Each proportion, each solar alignment, each symbol was an attempt to keep the connection with the divine alive. The flaming star also appears in the texts of the early Christians, especially in the Gnostic Gospels. There, Christ is not described as an external savior, but as an inner light. The Gospel of Thomas states, "He who knows everything but does not know himself is far from the truth." This is the essence of the flame. To know oneself is to rediscover the inner star. The early Christians were, for the most part, initiates of the Egyptian and Hellenic schools who understood Christ as a frequency of solar consciousness. Mary Magdalene, often portrayed as the lost disciple, was one of the bearers of this hidden knowledge, the guardian of the feminine flame, the receptive polarity of the sacred fire. For centuries, these teachings were persecuted. The rise of institutionalized religion deliberately erased references to the inner Christ, replacing them with dogmas, hierarchies, and external rituals. But the flame continued to manifest in the hearts of those who dared to go beyond the literal. Mystics like Origen, Clement of Alexandria, John of the Cross, and Teresa of Avila directly accessed this light and spoke of a fire that burned without destroying, a silent and living presence that transformed everything with love. They touched the star, even under the threat of excommunication or death. The sacred architecture of Egypt was replicated in temples and churches all over Europe, but few understood that each column, each stained glass window, and each proportion were attempts to recreate the resonance of the flame. The dome, the altar, the chants, everything was part of a ritual to activate solar consciousness, but the meaning was lost, and only empty forms remained. The hidden Egypt remains present not as a physical place, but as a spiritual frequency that continues to live in the subtle planes, accessible to those who truly wish to remember. The solar legacy never disappeared. It merely waited for the time of collective awakening. And this time is coming. The celestial alignments, the energy shifts, and the collapse of external structures announce the return of the fire. The inner Egypt begins to reveal itself within every being that seeks truth beyond words. The flaming star pulses more strongly, activating memories, untying ancestral knots, reigniting the forgotten mission. Those who hear this call feel a mixture of longing and responsibility, as if something very ancient is returning to be finally fulfilled. The flame is alive, and within the temple of the heart, it waits to be recognized again as the eternal spark of the dormant divinity. The history of humanity is not just the narrative of peoples, conquests, and discoveries. It is, above all, the silent account of the hidden truths, of revelations buried under the weight of interests that feared the awakening of the human spirit. Among all the silenced truths, perhaps the most carefully concealed has been the existence of the flaming star and its connection with the Christ consciousness. Those who controlled empires, religions, and power structures have always known that there is a fire that, once ignited in the human heart, makes any being uncontrollable. This fire does not accept chains, does not obey dogmas, does not bow before artificial hierarchies. It is living freedom, and for this reason, from the post-Atlantean ages to modern days, there has been an invisible conspiracy whose sole purpose was to extinguish or divert this inner glow before it became collective. When Christ manifested his light on the physical plane, he did not come to found a religion, but to reignite the divine spark in human beings. Jesus' message was simple and revolutionary. The kingdom of God is within you. Each healing, each parable, each silence contained vibrational codes intended to activate the flaming star in each heart that was ready. But light is dangerous for those who live from the shadows. Shortly after his departure, the Christ-like message began to be systematically altered. Within a few centuries, political councils transformed the inner Christ into an external and conditioned entity, whose grace could only be accessed through a mediating institution. The star was torn from the chests of men and placed high on cathedrals, distant, cold, untouchable. The Gospels speaking about inner light were declared heretical. Manuscripts such as the Gospel of Thomas, that of Mary Magdalene, that of Philip, and other Gnostic texts revealed a truth too dangerous, that there is no separation between human and divine. In them, Christ was not an external savior, but a state of consciousness accessible to all. These texts were buried, hidden in caves, protected by initiates who knew that, one day, they would be found again. When the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi library came to light, centuries later, the world was able to glimpse fragments of this suppressed truth, a hidden star among dusty pages waiting to be read with the eyes of the soul. Mary Magdalene was one of the figures most harshly erased by the conspiracy of silence. Her image was distorted, downgraded, manipulated, but original records show that she was an initiate of the highest degrees of the solar mysteries. It was she who understood Christ in his vibrational essence, who recognized him not only as a master, but as a mirror of the divine spark that lives in all of us. Her presence was not tolerated by the nascent patriarchy, which feared the power of the feminine polarity integrated with the Christic light. By silencing her, they silenced an essential key of the flaming star, the power of intuition, receptivity, and the alchemical fusion between mind and heart. Throughout the centuries, secret groups have strived to preserve fragments of the flame. The Knights Templar, for example, safeguarded in their symbols, rituals, and architecture the lost keys of the star. Their cathedrals were designed based on sacred geometries that replicated the vibrational field of the illuminated heart. The stained glass, crosses, and labyrinths were not mere ornaments. They were coded spiritual maps designed to activate specific frequencies in those who contemplated them. But as always, light attracted shadow. The Templar order was destroyed by forces that, under the guise of royalty and sanctity, acted out of fear of spiritual freedom. Their leaders were tortured, killed, and their secrets scattered. Later on, societies such as the Freemasonry, the Rosicrucians, and other discreet circles inherited pieces of the knowledge of the flame. However, not all members understood the entirety of what they were protecting. Many symbols were passed on without full understanding. The flaming five-pointed star, the compass, the square, the all-seeing eye, all these were codes originated from ancient solar wisdom, but they gradually became devoid of spiritual meaning and used as ornaments or control tools. The symbol of the star, when desacralized, was trivialized, and what should have been a map of ascension became a soulless logo, a distorted icon, a profaned ornament. The conspiracy did not occur only on physical levels. On subtle planes, low-frequency vibrational forces acted and continue to act to keep humanity disconnected from the inner flame. They feed distractions, conflicts, polarizations, fears, and dependence on external structures. They create false leaders, dogmas coded in spirituality, and paths that promise light but imprison consciousness. Whenever a human being approaches the flame, opposing forces emerge to divert them. Doubt, discouragement, fatigue, conflict. It's an invisible fight, but absolutely real. Because the awakening of the flaming star in a soul represents a direct threat to the entire control system based on ignorance and fear. However, even with all efforts to extinguish this light, it was never extinguished. Because the flame does not belong to this world. It is the reflection of the divine source itself. And even when all structures fail, even when chaos seems to dominate, the star continues to pulse silently within every being that dares to stop, breathe, and listen. It whispers in dreams, in synchronicities, in deep pains that demand change. And when it is finally heard, it begins to burn. First as restlessness, then as a quest, and finally as a memory. It is at this moment that the conspiracy fails, because there is no force in the universe that can prevent an awakened heart from recognizing its own light. In the 21st century, with global access to information and the fall of previously untouchable structures, fragments of truth began to come together. The symbol of the blazing star began to reappear in meditations, channelings, near-death experiences, spiritual accounts, and even in cutting-edge science. Quantum physics began to speak of unified fields, fractal patterns, cosmic intelligence, concepts that echo the oldest teachings of solar wisdom. Medical sciences began to recognize the role of heart coherence, the pineal gland, and emotional vibration in health. Everything that was once considered esoteric began to be validated through unexpected avenues, and so the star returns, not with violence, but with truth. Those who feel this calling today are not formal initiates. They do not necessarily belong to orders or schools. They are souls who have awakened on their own, guided by the inner flame, without intermediaries. They are everywhere: doctors, artists, mothers, teachers, spiritual leaders, solitary walkers. All touched by a light they cannot explain, but that transforms their perception of reality. This new generation of guardians no longer needs to hide, because the time of revelation has arrived. The conspiracy of silence can no longer stand in the face of ignited hearts that radiate truth with every gesture, every word, every vibration. The flaming star now no longer needs to be sought externally. It is igniting from within. It does not require approval, dogmas, or protection. It just needs to be recognized. The great conspiracy ends when each individual decides to look at themselves with courage, confront their fears, silence the distractions, and remember what they have always been. Christ lives, not as a distant figure, but as living fire on the altar of the heart. And the star, previously hidden for centuries, re-emerges to restore what was never lost, the innate divinity of every human being, and the certainty that true freedom is internal, non-negotiable, invincible. For a long time, science and spirituality were presented as opposing fields, almost enemies, as if one represented the light of reason and the other the shadows of belief. This separation, however, is artificial and recent. In ancient times, such as in the Egyptian mystery schools and the Atlantean temples, knowledge was unified. It was understood that the universe was a living mind, and that consciousness was not a product of the brain, but the matrix of reality itself. The symbol of the flaming star, in this context, was never seen as mystical or folkloric, but as a living pattern, mathematically exact, energetically active, a vibrational model of the cosmos and human structure itself. And now, as quantum physics, neuroscience, biology, and cosmology approach what the ancients already knew, a bridge begins to form, an inevitable reconciliation between what we feel and what we can prove. Spirit and science meet at the same point, the human heart illuminated by the star. Sacred geometry is one of the most straightforward ways to understand how the flaming star manifests in the subtle and physical planes of existence. The five-pointed star, representing the human microcosm and also the golden ratio, is present everywhere from floral patterns, shells, and galaxies to human embryonic formation. The pentagram, the symbol of the star, was understood by Pythagoras and his disciples as a vibrational key to the universe. It represents the balance between the five elements, earth, water, fire, air, and ether, and is deeply linked to the shape of the human body with its five limbs. This sacred structure is an echo of the divine mind itself, expressed in form. The universe is not chaos, it is vibrational order, and the flaming star is the central code of this harmony. Each vertex of the star represents a stage on the path of ascension, and its center represents the point of union between the human and the divine. Within the human body, the manifestation of the star primarily occurs through the pineal gland, the heart's toroidal field, and the brain spinal axis. The pineal gland, known to the ancients as the Eye of Horus, the Seal of God, or the Seat of the Soul, is a structure that, when activated, allows for direct connection with higher planes of consciousness. By producing melatonin, DMT, and other endogenous substances, the pineal gland acts as a sort of multidimensional antenna. However, this activation does not occur solely through external techniques. It happens when the emotional field and the heart's magnetic field come into coherence, emitting a high frequency that resonates with the flaming star. Modern science, through institutions such as the HeartMath Institute, can now measure these frequencies and prove that states of love, gratitude, and presence create a more ordered, stronger electromagnetic field capable of influencing not only the body, but the surrounding environment. The toroidal field of the heart is a true living star pulsating within us. It radiates electromagnetic waves that extend several meters around the body. When this field comes into coherence with the mind and the pineal center, an energetic synchronicity occurs capable of unlocking genetic patterns, healing traumas, and accessing deeper levels of perception. The flaming star is the map of this alignment. It emerges when there is resonance between the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual planes. Science is beginning to understand this in fragments through epigenetics, neuroplasticity, and investigations into morphogenetic fields. But the ancients knew, when a human being vibrates in truth, their cellular structure, their neurons, their breath, everything aligns with the original frequency of creation. In the study of DNA, scientists have discovered geometric patterns that refer to the Fibonacci sequence and the golden ratio, which is also present in the flaming star. This discovery is not accidental. It means that the same intelligence that organizes the cosmos also structures the genetic code. We are fractals of the whole, and the star, in this context, is the signature of this cosmic consciousness within us. When consciousness expands, it activates dormant genes, awakens previously latent abilities, and refines the perceptual field. This activation is not magic. It's sacred biology. It is the natural expression of a living system that evolves not only by natural selection, but by leaps of consciousness. Each genuine spiritual awakening activates vibrational patterns that modify the very structure of the being. Quantum physics, by breaking with the mechanistic paradigm, brought back the notion that the observer influences the observed. This means that reality is not fixed, but shaped by consciousness. The presence of the flaming star as an energetic archetype operates on this same principle. It is not an object, it is a frequency, and when a human being incorporates it, they cease to be just an observer of life and become a conscious co-creator of reality. Experiments such as the double slit, quantum entanglement, and non-locality prove that everything is interconnected. This is what the ancients called the web of life, the web of light, where each being is a vibrant node that influences the whole. The flaming star, when activated, transforms the being into a luminous point of this network, radiating a frequency of healing, order, and evolution. The concept of a unified field, explored by scientists such as Nassim Haramein, leads us to understand that the vacuum is not empty, but full of energy and information. Within this vibrational matrix, everything that exists is interconnected by a living intelligence. Spirituality refers to this as the Word, the Logos, the Holy Spirit. Science now calls it the zero-point field or vacuum field. Both refer to the same source, and the flaming star is the entry point of this source into the human microcosm. It's like an antenna that tunes the being to the frequency of creation, and once tuned in, the being begins to operate with greater clarity, creativity, love, and manifestation power. Neuroscience is also beginning to reveal the practical effects of spiritual activation. Deep meditative states alter the functioning of the brain, generating hemispheric coherence, increase in gamma waves, and activation of areas related to empathy, compassion, and expanded perception. These states are the same as those described by mystics throughout the centuries when they reported experiences with the flaming star. This is not about hallucination or blind belief, but about elevated states of consciousness measurable by modern instruments. Science increasingly validates what the wise have always known, that the human being is a living temple, and that the divine spark can be activated in a practical and real way, transforming not only perception, but the biology and destiny of the individual. The reunion between science and spirit is just beginning, but it is already irreversible. The great discoveries of the 21st century will not only be technological, but internal. The true evolutionary leap of humanity will not come from faster machines or artificial intelligence, but from divine intelligence awakening within the human being. The flaming star is the symbol of this conscious evolution. It represents the point where the heart aligns with the mind and both submit to the light of the soul. This fusion creates a new human being, a homo luminous, who operates beyond duality, beyond fear, beyond separation. A being who understands its function as a living cell of the universal body. The medicine of the future will also be spiritual, not based on religious dogmas, but on vibrational understanding. Diseases will no longer be treated merely as chemical failures, but will be seen as energy imbalances caused by thoughts, emotions, and choices misaligned with essence. The flaming star, in this context, will be a powerful therapeutic key. Its frequency could be replicated in resonances, visualizations, crystals, sounds, and even in applied energy engineering. It will be recognized as a harmonic standard of complete health, mental, emotional, and physical. Vibrational medicine and transpersonal psychology are already moving in this direction. When science and spirituality finally join hands, the world will witness the birth of a new era. It won't be a return to the past, but a mature integration of ancient wisdom with modern knowledge. The flaming star will no longer belong to esoteric elites, but will become part of common vocabulary, taught in schools, used in hospitals, invoked in homes. Not as a religious symbol, but as a map for reconnecting with the inner divine. Because the flame does not belong to a people, a belief, or a tradition. It belongs to humanity. It's the seal of origin. It's the code of ascension. And science, finally, is beginning to recognize what the Spirit has always known, that we are by nature light. Behind every human suffering, every existential unrest, there is a single call pulsating in silence: the return to the origin. This call does not come from outside. It is not taught in schools nor propagated by the media. It springs from within silently, like a sigh from the soul trapped in layers of conditioning. It is a longing that words do not translate, but that is felt as an unexplainable longing, an echo of something we once were and have forgotten. This is the beginning of the awakening of the Christ consciousness, not as a theological concept or religious promise, but as an intimate, profound, and irreversible process of returning to the essential truth of being. The flaming star, in this awakening, is the silent beacon that begins to shine within those who are tired of illusion, repetition, disconnection. It does not impose itself, it calls, and those who hear never return to being the same. The Christ consciousness is not a devotion to a historical figure, but the activation of a specific frequency of the human soul. Christ, in this context, is not a name, but a vibration. It is the frequency of unconditional love, of silent clarity, of lived truth, of the non-judgmental presence. This consciousness has been present in many cultures and in many avatars throughout history: Krishna, Buddha, Quetzalcoatl, Yeshua. All manifestations of this solar intelligence that seeks to express itself on the human plane. But the great revelation is that this consciousness does not belong to a select few. It lives in everyone. Every human being carries, dormant within them, this Christic potential, this flaming star, waiting for the right conditions to emerge. And these conditions do not depend on the world. they depend solely on the internal decision to remember. This awakening is not a singular event. It is a spiraling process with phases of inner death and rebirth. The first symptom of the activation of Christ consciousness is dissatisfaction with the superficial world. Nothing that once brought pleasure seems sufficient anymore. Achievements lose their luster, conversations become hollow, routines reveal themselves to be mechanical. Then, a void emerges that many confuse with depression, but which in reality is the necessary emptying for something greater to be born. The old identity begins to crumble, the ego panics, the masks fall, and in this internal chaos, the star begins to light up, shyly, like an ember in the chest that warms silently. It does not shout, but its presence is undeniable. As this light grows, the individual begins to see their shadows, and this is the second stage of awakening, the confrontation with everything that has been denied, repressed, or falsified. Christ consciousness is not a state of perfection, but of wholeness. It demands radical authenticity. It's not about being good, but about being real. The star's light illuminates every dark corner of the psyche, revealing fears, attachments, traumas, lies, and constructed identities. This process can be painful, as it represents the deconstruction of the false self. But it is also liberating, as each layer that falls brings the being closer to its essence. The star's fire is purifying. It burns everything that is not true, but not with violence, with compassion. It is the fire of love. At this point, many wish to turn back. The old consciousness, although limited, provides comfort. Unconsciousness seems easier, but once the flame has been seen, ignoring it becomes impossible. The discomfort of the lie becomes greater than the fear of the truth, and then begins the third stage, surrender. The individual realizes that they can no longer control the process. They are not the author of the transformation, but the soil where the transformation takes place. Surrender allows the Christ consciousness to take over. A new perception of time, body, and relationships emerges. Priorities change. Silence becomes necessary. The internal gains more value than the external. Presence replaces haste, and the flame intensifies. Over time, this inner presence begins to reorganize life. People, habits, beliefs, and circumstances start to align with the new frequency, not by effort, but by resonance. Everything that does not vibrate at the same frequency as the star begins to dissolve. Work becomes mission. Relationships become mirrors. Challenges become initiations. Life, once fragmented, starts to reveal a pattern, a subtle coherence, as if an invisible intelligence is redesigning everything. And this intelligence is the manifestation of the Christ consciousness itself. The flaming star now pulses in every gesture, thought, and word. The being no longer needs to do to prove, it simply is. This state of being is not static. It is dynamic, continuously expanding. The Christ consciousness, once activated, continues to grow, illuminating new levels of reality. One begins to perceive the invisible connections between all things. They feel the other as an extension of themselves. They see the divine in matter, in nature, in silence. Time loses its rigidity. The body becomes more sensitive. Spiritual gifts intensify. Intuition, telepathy, healing, vision. But all of this is a consequence, not a goal. The true hallmark of Christ awakening is simplicity, a serene humility that comes from recognizing one's own eternity. The ego no longer needs validation. The soul is enough. The violet flame, often associated with transmutation, becomes a powerful ally in this process. It represents the subtle fire that burns karma, dissolves obsolete contracts, purifies the energy field. When invoked consciously, it prepares the inner ground for the flaming star to shine more intensely. Meditations with the violet flame, practices of deep silence, spontaneous prayers, and the simple act of being present are fuels for this ongoing activation. It's not about magical techniques, but about sustained frequency. The daily practice of love, truth, and presence is the altar where the star remains lit. The age of Aquarius, which has already begun, is the perfect vibrational setting for this mass awakening. We have moved from the era of external authorities to the era of spiritual sovereignty. Each being is called to become their own master, to listen to their own light, to trust in their own star. The Christ consciousness will not come from above, as an imposition, but from within, like a blossoming. Humanity, collectively, is being initiated. The global crises, social collapses, apparent conflicts are the symptoms of a planetary birth. The flaming star is rekindling not in temples, but in millions of hearts, silently, like a fire that spreads without consuming, but transforming everything with its light. Those who have already awakened are called to serve as silent guides, not to teach, impose, or convert, but to radiate. The new spiritual mission is not to convince anyone, but to be a living presence of truth. The vibrational field of an ignited soul is more eloquent than 1,000 words, and it is this field that activates others in a chain, creating a wave of collective awakening. The flaming star, as an energy field, expands in a non-linear way, through resonance. And the more beings awaken, the easier it becomes for others to hear the call. We are facing a turning point, and each being that chooses to live authentically contributes to this irreversible transformation. This awakening, however subtle it may be, completely alters reality. Death ceases to be an end. Fear loses strength. Life becomes sacred. The everyday gains depth. Each gesture, each breath, each encounter carries a broader meaning. There is no longer a separation between the sacred and the profane, between the spiritual and the material. Everything is spirit in expression. The Christ consciousness dissolves duality. It unifies. And in this unification, the flaming star shines in its totality, not just as a symbol, but as a permanent state of being. It is the beginning of a new cycle, not of the world, but of the human being. A cycle where the divine is no longer sought, but lived, where Christ is not worshipped, but embodied, and where the star is no longer a promise, but a reality. In times when reason seems to falter in the face of chaos and hope fragments under the weight of constant crises, an ancient echo begins to vibrate among the seekers of the spirit, the prophecies. But unlike what modern culture imagines, these prophecies are not dark predictions about the end of the world. They are reminders of a time that returns, symbolic codes inscribed in the human soul, designed by civilizations that knew that history is not a straight line, but a cycle, and that each cycle carries within it the opportunity to be reborn. The flaming star in this panorama is the central archetype of these visions. It appears not as destruction, but as revelation. It is the luminous response to centuries of forgetfulness, and the ancients knew this. In their dances, songs, temples, stones, and skies, they left clues that today, when correctly decoded, point clearly, the time of return has arrived, and it will not come with fireworks or trumpets, but with silent fire lit within awakened hearts. The Mayans, guardians of one of the most complex cosmologies ever known, did not predict the end of the world in 2012, as many interpreted. They announced the end of a dark cycle and the birth of a new era, a vibrational turning point in human history. The Mayan calendar is, above all, a cosmic clock. It marks alignments between the planet, the sun, and the center of the galaxy. The central sun, or Hunab-Ku, represented as a spiraling vortex, exactly like the flaming star field in its energetic representation. They spoke of the time of awakening, when the children of the sun would remember their origin and their mission. Each Katun, each Baktun, was a measure of preparation for this final moment, in which humans would no longer need priests, castes, or intermediaries, because the Christic light would be reactivated in the living temple of their own being. The Hopis, North American indigenous people with a deep connection to the stars, also announced this return. Their prophecies, orally passed down through generations, speak of a blue star that will appear in the sky as a sign of an irreversible change on Earth. This star is not just astronomical, it is symbolic. It represents the collective activation of solar consciousness, the flaming star igniting not only in a few, but in many. They also speak of the arrival of the rainbow people, beings of all races and nations who would unite in the name of peace and truth, driven not by flags, but by the remembrance of the Spirit. These people are already among us. They are those who do not fit into any old structure, but carry within them an undeniable call to serve the light. The Essenes, a community to which Yeshua himself was connected, lived in direct alignment with cosmic cycles and the stars. Their records spoke of the flame of rebirth that would shine again in the last days. This fire would not come from the outside, but from within. They understood the flaming star as the central code for spiritual regeneration. Their practices were daily. Their fasts were not empty rituals, but ways to cleanse the body to receive the fire of divine presence. They lived on the margins of religious institutions, for they knew that the true temple was not made of stone, but of flesh and spirit. They also foresaw an era of institutional collapse, where religious structures would fall because they could no longer bear the light of truth, and we are living this exact scenario. The Book of Enoch, one of the most mysterious and excluded texts from official canons, narrates the story of the Watchers, beings of light who descended to earth to teach, but ended up trapped in material density. At the heart of this narrative is the fall of celestial wisdom and its subsequent recovery by those who could read the signs of heaven and earth. The flaming star, in this context, is the portal of reconnection between dimensions, the seal of the lost covenant, which would be reactivated at the end of times. The book also speaks of the sealed books that would only be opened by the righteous, metaphors for the internal codes that only reveal themselves when the soul reaches the necessary vibrational level. These codes are not in external libraries, but in the spiritual DNA of each one who awakens. Various indigenous cultures of the Americas also speak of the flame of the heart as a generating force of balance and healing. The Andean peoples, direct heirs of Atlantean wisdom, used the symbol of the Chicana, the Andean cross, as a cosmic map. At its center, the point of union represents the flaming star, the place where worlds intersect, where duality merges into unity. This star is not visible to the physical eyes, but felt by those who live in harmony with nature, with the cycles, with life. The Andean cosmovision states that we are in the time of the Taripai Pacha, the time of reuniting with oneself. And what is this, if not the exact description of the awakening of the Christ consciousness? The 7 seals mentioned in the Revelation, usually interpreted with fear, are actually stages of consciousness opening. Each seal represents a veil that falls, an illusion that dissolves, an energy center that activates. And at the heart of the revelation, the Lamb with 7 eyes and 7 horns symbolizes full spiritual vision and power, the flaming star activated at its peak. The revelation, whose original word means revelation, does not announce destruction, but enlightenment. It is the revelation of the hidden truth, of the spirit behind the form, of the presence behind the appearance. And this revelation is happening now in every being that chooses to awaken. Ancient numerologists and astrologers knew that certain numbers were not just measurements, but vibrational portals. The number 5, the basis of the pentagram, represents humanity in its sacred form. The number 7 signifies purification processes. The number 12 embodies the totality of the Christic manifestation, and 144,000, mentioned in biblical texts, refers to a collective soul frequency, a critical mass of consciousness that, when vibrationally united, would create the necessary leap for planetary ascension. These are not literal numbers, but coded energy fields, and the flaming star is the key to accessing these fields, as each of its vertices is aligned to one of these frequencies. The time of prophecies is not the future, it is the present. All the signs given by the ancients are fulfilling before our eyes, not as catastrophes, but as invitations. Invitations to return, invitations to listen, invitations to remember, the increase in extreme events, the collapse of paradigms, the emergence of new technologies, the amplification of global consciousness. All this is part of the vibrational reconfiguration of the earth to receive what has already been promised, the rebirth of Christic light in the human plane. And this rebirth will not come from external hands, but from the fire of the star igniting silently within each sincere heart. There is also the emergence of the so-called children of the sun, ancient souls who, even unknowingly, carry within them the code of the star. They are born with sharp perception, heightened sensitivity, a strong sense of mission, and a refusal to submit to the system. They are souls awakened from an early age and often suffer for not fitting in, but their presence is essential. They are the bearers of the new code, the conductors of the new frequency. Where they are, they activate. Where they pass, they illuminate. They do not preach, they radiate. They do not impose, they transform by example. And their strength is not in quantity, but in the vibrational quality they sustain. They are incarnated stars. The final cycle announced by so many traditions is that of planetary purification, not a punishment, but a realignment. The planet responds to the increase in the vibrational frequency of human consciousness. Everything that does not resonate with the truth will be exposed, collapsed, and transmuted. Politics, economics, religion, education, nothing will remain untouched. The flaming star, when massively activated, emanates a wave of light that dismantles systems based on fear, scarcity, and separation. This process has already begun, and it cannot be stopped, because it is not driven by ideologies, but by the divine will itself operating through awakened humanity. And finally, the promise of a new heaven and a new earth is not literal, but vibrational. The new heaven is expanded consciousness. The new earth is the reality regenerated by this consciousness. The flaming star is the portal between the two. It is the bridge between the visible and the invisible, between the human and the divine, between the forgotten past and the remembered future. Prophecies are fulfilled not to scare, but to remind us of who we are, to remind us of where we came from, and most importantly, to remind us of where we are going, back to the origin, to the light, to the fire that never went out, back to the star. The great mistake of the modern mind is to believe that spirituality belongs to the extraordinary, to secluded retreats, to reclusive monks, to sophisticated ceremonies, or to rare moments of transcendental enlightenment. However, the true test of Christ consciousness and the flaming star is not in altered states of consciousness or mystical visions, but in the ability to live the sacred in the ordinary. Integrating the divine into routine, body, relationships, and work is the highest degree of initiation. Because it's easy to contemplate the light when everything is calm, the real challenge is to keep the star lit in the heart when life becomes dense, confusing, imperfect. True spirituality does not take us away from the world, but reintroduces us to it with new eyes, new hearing, new fire. Everyday life, then, ceases to be a prison and becomes a temple. The first step toward this integration begins with the awareness of the body as an extension of the spirit. The physical body is not an obstacle to light, but its channel of manifestation. Each cell, each organ, each breath is a living particle of divine intelligence. Eating with awareness, moving with gratitude, resting with presence are acts as sacred as praying or meditating. The body, when treated as an altar, responds with vigor, clarity, and vitality. The blazing star anchors more easily when the physical temple is clean, nourished, and aligned with higher purposes. This does not require perfection or fanaticism, but respect and listening. The body is the silent language of the soul, and when listened to, reveals much more than any guru or doctrine. The inner life becomes the second field of integration. Thoughts, emotions, and intentions are creative forces. When misaligned, they create noise, imbalance, and pain. When aligned with the Christic frequency, they generate peace, expansion, and truth. Living the flaming star means cultivating internal states of coherence. This requires loving vigilance, not repression, but observation. It's not about never feeling anger, fear, or sadness, but about not identifying with these emotions. Allow them to pass like clouds, maintaining a firm center in the heart, where the flame burns silently. This center, when strengthened, becomes unshakable. Not because it eliminates external conflicts, but because it refuses to lose itself in them. Human relationships are the great mirror of the Christ consciousness in action. It's easy to talk about universal love in isolation. The challenge is to practice it in traffic, in family conflicts, in the demands of daily life. The blazing star calls for consistency. What is meditated upon in solitude should be practiced in encounter. Looking into each other's eyes, listening with presence, accepting without judgment. These are the most transformative rituals. Each relationship is an opportunity to expand or retract the inner light. When we treat others as a spark from the same source, even if they have not yet remembered this, something changes. The vibrational field elevates, the star shines, and the environment transforms. Work, often seen as a burden or obligation, is another crucial point of integration. Living the flaming star at work does not mean abandoning everything and becoming a healer or spiritual instructor. It means putting presence, purpose, and compassion into every action. A baker who bakes bread with love is more aligned with Christ than a spiritual master who repeats soulless words. Christ consciousness does not judge roles, but intentions. When work ceases to be a source of survival and becomes an expression of the soul, everything changes. The effort turns into offering. Time gains meaning. Success is no longer measured by profits, but by how much light is given to the world. Prosperity, often treated as a spiritual taboo, is actually a natural extension of the flaming star's energy. True abundance is not accumulation, but flow. It is the recognition that the universe is generous by nature and that the light we give to the world returns multiplied. When one lives with coherence, authenticity, and surrender, resources flow. The right people appear, opportunities arise, not by magic, but by resonance. The vibrational field of someone living the Christ consciousness attracts what sustains their mission. Money ceases to be a problem or a fetish and becomes a tool. Wealth is not sought for ego, but for service. The flaming star does not condemn matter, it illuminates it. Another vital aspect of integration is the use of time. Modern life hijacks our attention with an excess of stimuli, distractions, and urgencies. Living the star requires reclaiming sacred time, the silence, the pause, the gap between thoughts. Creating daily moments of internal connection, even if brief, is like fueling the flame so it doesn't go out in the gale of haste. It's not about meditating for hours, but being fully present in simple moments. Breathing consciously, feeling the sun on your skin, observing a tree, listening to a song with your heart. These are the places where the star reveals itself, not in grand spectacles, but in the ordinary lived with presence. The spiritual practice ceases to be separate from the rest of life. It's no longer an activity marked on the calendar, but the very way of living. Thought turns into prayer, gesture turns into blessing, silence turns into response, life turns into a temple. Everything becomes spiritual when living from the star. The pains continue to exist, but they are welcomed with love. The challenges remain, but they lose the power to hurt, because the center remains firm. The inner flame is the point of stability in an unstable world, and the more you live in it, the more it expands, touching others, activating other flames, forming a living network of ignited hearts. Ethics becomes a consequence, not an imposition. There is no longer a need for external rules to do what is right. The heart becomes a compass. Truth becomes natural, kindness, spontaneous, because the flaming star reorganizes the soul from the inside out, not by force, but by resonance. It makes us incapable of hurting, betraying, manipulating, or lying, not out of fear of punishment, but because it simply no longer resonates. Like trying to breathe in an environment without oxygen, disconnected behaviors become unsustainable, coherence becomes comfort, and love, the natural state of being. Living the flaming star in everyday life also means recognizing cycles. There are days of intense light and days of shadow. There are phases of expansion and phases of withdrawal. The Christ consciousness does not demand constant perfection, but continuous presence. Honoring one's own limits, embracing failures, starting over without guilt. This too is living the flame. Because the sacred fire does not judge, it merely transforms. Each mistake is a chance to realign, each pain a reminder, Each challenge, a disguised initiation, and over time, the being learns to trust, not in the world, but in the light that inhabits it. The practice of simple meditations, mindful breathing, spontaneous prayers, and visualizations of the star at the heart's center are valuable tools. Visualizing the flaming star expanding in the heart, radiating golden light throughout the body, is a powerful alignment practice. But more than a technique, it's a state of being. The star lives in intention, in the love we put into actions, in the truth we uphold in silence. And the more it is lived, the more it expands, becoming a field, a presence, a channel through which the divine acts in this world. Living the flaming star is ultimately becoming one with it, not worshiping it as something external, but recognizing it as what we are. Light that came to earth to remind us of our own origin, fire that incarnates to ignite other fires. And in this journey of integration, the world ceases to be a stage for struggle and becomes a school of love, where every step, every breath, and every encounter is an opportunity to radiate the silent Christ that burns within us, not anymore as an idea, but as a living reality. The cycle is coming full circle. After ages of decline, separation, and oblivion, a new dawn begins to emerge in the collective consciousness of humanity. But this is not merely a new chronological time, it's a new state of being. The so-called New Earth is not the physical replacement of the planet, but the vibrational reconfiguration of reality from the awakening of the Christ consciousness. It will not be imposed from heaven to earth, but will emerge from earth to the cosmos, radiating from within outward, born from the silent decision of each human being who chooses to live in coherence with the flaming star that burns at the center of their being. What is underway is not an end, but a return. The return of Christ, not as a saving entity, but as a living frequency in the collective body of awakened humanity. Christ returns, yes, but not from the outside. He emerges from within at the exact moment we remember our true divine nature. The new earth is built by vibration. There won't be a divine decree that reshapes mountains or redesigns cities. What is happening is a silent yet radical alteration in the planet's energy field. Each thought aligned with love, each emotion purified by truth, each action driven by compassion, transforms not just the individual, but the collective mesh. The flaming star, once activated en masse, alters the vibrational pattern of humanity. The density of fear, scarcity, competition, and separation loses its hold. The new frequency does not support lies. It does not fuel war. It does not sustain structures based on domination. Thus, systems collapse, not as a punishment, but due to vibrational misalignment. The old simply can no longer exist in the new field. Destruction, therefore, is not destructive, it is liberating. In this new field, the so-called cities of light naturally emerge, communities where the spirit is the center of social organization. These places are not utopias, but natural expressions of a collective living in resonance with the Christ consciousness. In them, education is aimed at awakening the soul, health is based on vital energy, work is an expression of the soul's mission, and politics is governed by the wisdom of the heart. There is no need for oppressive hierarchies because the flaming star burns in the chest of every citizen. Ethics springs from consciousness, not coercion. Cooperation replaces competition. Abundance is collective, and joy is a natural state, not a weekend prize. Science finds its true place, no longer as a tool of control, but as the language of the sacred. Vibrational technologies, clean energies, telepathic communication, quantum healing, and interaction with interdimensional intelligences become the norm. The veil between worlds dissolves, and Earth is recognized as part of a larger cosmic community. We are not alone. We never were. The flaming star is the vibrational signature that connects us with other civilizations that have been living in Christ consciousness for millennia. Contact, when it occurs, is not invasive or spectacular. It is natural, quiet, like the reunion between siblings who recognize each other by the light they emit, not by the appearance they possess. The inner Christ becomes a cosmic passport, and Earth, at last, is recognized as a living star in the process of ascension. Nature, for so long abused and exploited, reclaims its place as the silent master. Forests, oceans, mountains, and winds communicate with those who have relearned to listen. Each element is a code, each animal, a mirror, each flower, a prayer. Humans return to their place in the great circle of life, not as dominators, but as guardians. Ancestral practices return, not as folklore, but as vital wisdom. Medicinal plants, shamanic chants, ceremonies with earth, fire, water, and air. All of this re-emerges as the living language of the soul. Spirituality ceases to be discourse and becomes experience once again. One no longer studies the divine. One lives the divine with every breath. The inner Christ, now awakened, completely alters the way the individual relates to everything. Guilt gives way to responsibility, pain to wisdom, the past to presence, the ego to surrender, control to trust, separation to communion. Salvation is no longer sought, alignment is sought. Miracles are no longer pursued. The miracle of the now is acknowledged. And the blazing star, which was once a timid spark, becomes an internal sun that guides all steps, illuminates all decisions, warms all relationships. This light does not need to be shown, only lived, because it speaks for itself. It heals without touching, teaches without words, transforms without force. It is the Word made flesh. It is the divine dwelling in the human. It is heaven descending to earth, not as a spectacle, but as a state of continuous consciousness. This new human being, shaped by the light of the flaming star, walks through the world with a silent but transformative presence. He does not convince, he inspires. He does not teach, he exemplifies. He does not lead, he serves. His presence alters the field, his silence conveys truths, his gaze activates memories. He doesn't need titles, positions, or stages, because he is a temple, he is a channel, he is a bridge. His body vibrates with the sound of creation. His mind is at peace. His heart is a home for all who approach. He does not fear the future because he lives in the eternal present. He does not resist pain because he has learned to transmute it into compassion. He does not run from the shadow because he knows that it is the contrast that reveals the light. The return of the inner Christ is the greatest miracle of humanity, not because it comes from outside, but because it has always been within, waiting for courage. The courage to break paradigms, to let go of identities, to cross the abyss of one's own soul and find at the center the flaming star saying, "You have never ceased to be light." This remembrance changes everything. There is no longer a need for approval, applause, reward, or salvation, because the being becomes whole. And when one is whole, everything aligns. The body, the relationships, the mission, the planet. Everything begins to spin in rhythm with the heart, which now beats in sync with the cosmos. The world as we know it, based on domination, scarcity, and fear, is crumbling because it can no longer bear the frequency of truth. This collapse is not a tragedy, it's a birth. We are witnessing the birth of a new humanity, not as a future event, but as a reality already in progress. Each being that awakens is a new cell in this collective body. Each choice for love, each genuine forgiveness, each reconnection with the essence is a brick in the construction of the new earth. And the blazing star is the seal of this construction. It is in the eyes of a child, in the strength of an elder, in the silent gesture of those who help unseen. It is everywhere there is truth, presence, and light. Therefore, the journey does not end here. On the contrary, this is where it begins, because remembering the light requires the responsibility of living it. The star is not a prize, it's a calling, and every calling requires a response. Humanity is being invited to become what it always was, a living expression of the divine, a moving temple, incarnate solar consciousness. There is no path outside of oneself. There is no truth beyond the heart. There is no time beyond the now. And in this now, the star shines, not only in the sky, but in you. Not only as a symbol, but as essence. not only as an idea, but as a living presence. Christ has returned, and he is exactly where he has always been, inside your heart, in silence, in fire, in light. Mind unfettered, if this flame has burned within you, then now it's your turn. Which part of the flaming star's journey touched your soul the most? Share in the comments. When you write, you anchor. When you comment, you manifest. And when someone reads, you ignite another spark. Shall we co-create this new field together? We are igniting this new earth as one heart. Each comment here is a live flame of this collective manifestation. If you felt something within you stir, then you need to watch the next video on your screen right now. The Book of 33 Steps, the Hidden Map, Jesus Left for Enlightenment. It reveals the hidden map left by Jesus, a sacred step-by-step guide towards the full awakening of Christ consciousness. See you there, radiant soul. We are mind unfettered, and the light can no longer be contained.